What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we've got our Week 7 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. So make sure you tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. And let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get right into it. Real quick, before getting into our breakdown, a quick word from our partners at PrizePicks, which is our favorite DFS site of choice this NFL and fantasy football season. If you guys aren't familiar with them, do yourself a favor and check them out. In fact, when you sign up right now and use code ADP, you get a 100% deposit match up to $100. And look, we're already doing all this research for fantasy football matchups, so why not take advantage of it and get some profits as well? PrizePicks, well, they allow you to basically do exactly that. They have so many different player prop bets, not only in terms of single stat DFS, but also in terms of fantasy score, and you can combine them any which way you want. Super simple, super easy to use. All you have to do, choose two more players from the board, and then just pick the over-under on their projected fantasy score or on their single stat. Again, pretty much for every single matchup as the week progresses, those options will be updated even more so. And then the great thing is you've got two different options in terms of how you want to bet it, whether it's a flex play, so that way you can miss one of your selections but still win. Obviously, that's the safer choice. Or if you want more bang for your buck, check out the power play, where if you get all your picks correct, well, you win even bigger. So again, check all of that out. Details in the description. And we kick off Week 7 on Thursday night with the Broncos at the Browns. Here, I'm mainly looking at the Broncos side of things as far as the wide receivers are concerned. Courtland Sutton is the wide receiver one on this offense, especially with Jerry Jeudy still not there, even though he's probably like a week away from returning to this lineup, which is why I also have Tim Patrick as a start. Could be kind of his last week as that, potential high touchdown upside guy, as somebody that you can take a shot on in the flex. But Courtland Sutton, definitely the preferred option. I would say mid-level wide receiver to high-end wide receiver to upside. For the Browns, it's tough to really predict the situation. Baker Mayfield is banged up. We don't really know what's going to happen. If he plays, is he going to be limited? Whether he plays at all, if the Browns are conservative with him. But I'm going to take a chance on Odell Beckham here. Yes, that's a completely, big time saga in it of itself, whether he stays with the Browns, whether he gets traded. But if it's someone other than Baker Mayfield, well, I think Beckham could be that kind of safety valve for them where you just throw those short passes. The Broncos have got a good defense. I don't think there's going to be too many big time plays in terms of, big touchdowns here. That's why I'm sitting someone like DPJ, who we actually called to break out this last week. He did exactly that, but it was on 4 catches. So, there was some luck there, 2 touchdowns. I would temper the expectations this week. Again, this is a good Broncos defense. The Browns quarterback situation, it's up in the air right now. There's question marks there. I'd rather go with Odell, who I think is going to handle more of the short to intermediate routes than any of these other wide receivers. That's why DPJ for me is a sit. Then Chiefs at the Titans. You start Tyreek Hill. Everybody knows that. The Titans defense is pretty weak, so I think Tyreek Hill should have a pretty good chance of blowing up here. The other Chiefs wide receivers, Mecole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, there might be, a hidden gem in there, but they're just so hard to predict. It's probably going to be dependent on a big touchdown with blown coverage, something like that. Again, with this Titans defense, nothing is impossible. I'm not taking it out of the realm of possibility, but it's just so difficult to predict. And more often than not, these guys are disappointing unless Tyreek Hill is injured. I don't see the big upside for either one, so I'd rather fade both of them. For the Titans, I'll start A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. Definitely not as confident in them as a Tyreek Hill or, really in them as I was at the beginning of the year. But the point is, A.J. Brown finally kind of had that good game that we were hoping for. Still no touchdown, but nice to see him more involved. The Chiefs defense has also been pretty friendly. Julio Jones, kind of disappointment as well as a potential, high-end wide receiver 2. I think you got to look at him as a low-end wide receiver 2 now. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily his fault. A lot of the blame can be put on Ryan Tannehill. He just has not looked good. He's looked like Ryan Tannehill from Miami. Like, that's how bad it's been. It's been a night and day difference between what we saw last season, the year prior in Tannehill to what it's been in 2021. That's why it's a bit concerning. But in a game that should feature a lot of points here, a lot of passing for the Titans, that's why I think Julio Jones could be a decent start. I love Derrick Henry. Don't get me wrong. He's going to do his thing on the ground. But if the Chiefs go up quickly on this Titans offense, which is definitely possible, I think that you're going to have to focus on the passing attack here. That's why Julio Jones could be a decent play as a low to mid-level wide receiver 2 on the week with some nice high upside. Moving on, Washington at the Packers. This is pretty simple. There's really only 2 main wide receivers in total here, one on each side. For the Washington, it's Terry McLaurin. I don't have as much faith in him as I do Devontae Adams for obvious reasons, that being the quarterback throwing him the football. Here, it's, Taylor Heineke for McLaurin, even though he's going to be going up versus a suspect Packers defense. But, that's been the same with Washington's defense. And at the end of the day, Devontae Adams is much, much more matchup proof than Terry McLaurin. He's got the better all-around quarterback. He's going to get more targets. He's going to be in more scoring opportunities more consistently. So Adams is a top 3 wide receiver every single week. For Terry McLaurin, you're hoping, Heineke is having a good day. Otherwise, you can get another 4 catches for 40 yards type of deal. That's the problem with McLaurin. That's the worry there. And I would say with the entire Washington offense in general. And as a result, we've got Diami Brown, Adam Humphries, both as sits. Same with the Packers, Lazard, Randall Cobb. Yes, Lazard got a touchdown this last week, but, he's the perfect example. Same with Randall Cobb, why these number 2 wide receivers for the Packers are so hard to trust. Like, Lazard did all right the week before, didn't do anything. Like, Randall Cobb, a couple weeks ago, he had 2 touchdown performance, then nothing. Literally last week, didn't have a single target. That's why it's Devontae Adams or bust on this Packers offense. Then Bengals at the Ravens. Things are starting to kind of set in stone here for the Bengals as far as the wide receivers are concerned. Jamar Chase coming out as that number 1 guy. And then T. Higgins, kind of that guy a little bit behind him, maybe 1A, 1B type of situation. I think this game has high scoring upside versus the Ravens. So to me, both these guys will have some decent opportunities. Then Tyler Boyd seems to be that kind of odd man out. I'm going to be sitting him here for the Ravens. Marquise Brown, yes, you kind of live with the big upside and sometimes disappointing drops, but Marquise Brown has, for the most part, been really good this season, and I think he can have success here versus the Bengals as well. High-end wide receiver 2 for the Ravens. Other guy, Sammy Watkins, didn't play this last week. If he does play, coming back from injury, I don't really trust it. Rashad Bateman is an interesting name. If Sammy Watkins doesn't play, I might take a shot on Bateman. I know people are probably disappointed in his first game of the season, but let's not forget, he's coming off his own injury. This is his first game, regular season, in the NFL, and he still got a good amount of targets, similar to a Marquise Brown. I think, the Ravens said it themselves. They don't want to put Bateman into the fire at once. So as the season progresses, he's going to get more and more involved. I'm not worried about Rashad Bateman here. If you're desperate and Sammy Watkins sits, then maybe I take a chance on Rashad Bateman. But otherwise, if Watkins plays, I'm sitting Rashad Bateman as well. Afterwards, Panthers at the Giants. For the Panthers, it's been the case pretty much the entire season. DJ Moore is the main viable wide receiver. Robbie Anderson, too inconsistent. Forget about Terrace Marshall. So it's DJ Moore there. Nice high-end wide receiver 2. For the Giants, Sterling Shepard and Kadarius Toney. I should mention Kadarius Toney, if he plays. He got banged up this last week. Sterling Shepard, he came back from his injury. He was good. Kind of what we expected. As far as sits, Robbie Anderson is a sit for us. For the Panthers, we alluded to it before. Look, last week, if it wasn't for a garbage time touchdown, Robbie Anderson would have been absolutely awful. And, even with that, he barely got double-digit points. So I'm fading Robbie Anderson here. For the Giants, Kenny Golladay, if he plays, and Kadarius Toney doesn't, then you could argue about putting him as a starter alongside with Sterling Shepard, more so in those standard scoring formats. But he didn't play in week 6. I would say his status probably also up in the air for week 7. So right now, I'd rather sit him as well. Shepard, the main guy that I want to trust for the Giants. Moving on, Falcons at the Dolphins, Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is the most reliable guy for the Falcons at this point in time. Yes, I understand that he has been underwhelming to say the least so far this season compared to what was 2020. But Ridley is still the most reliable guy for the Falcons. He's the primary target. Maybe Russell Gage comes back this week, but coming back from an injury, I'd rather not, immediately go to him. And also, let's not forget about, Cordero Patterson's involvement, Kyle Pitts getting more and more involved. So I want to see Russell Gage back for at least 1 week before I put him into our starting lineups, or at least have that discussion. For the Dolphins, Jalen Waddle, he's pretty much the lone wide receiver left standing for Miami. Had a nice game in week 6. If Devontae Parker plays, I would also consider starting him because this Falcons defense, not exactly elite. So for that reason, I don't mind him. Also, you got to factor in some inconsistencies with Waddle, him being a rookie. So don't be shocked if he doesn't duplicate the stat line that he had this last week. But obviously, if Parker doesn't play, Waddle has some really nice upside there. Then Jets at the Patriots. This one's a bit tough. Right now, you could argue you shouldn't start a single Jets wide receiver. And, I wouldn't really have an issue with that. Last time these two teams played, it was kind of ugly. Yes, maybe Zach Wilson has improved a little bit since then, but I still think the Patriots have the Jets number. I think that the Jets still have issues offensively. Zach Wilson hasn't really impressed me all that much. If there's one wide receiver I would take a chance on here, it's probably Jamison Crowder. I think that the Patriots are going to focus in mainly on Corey Davis as that, big name guy that they want to stop. So that's going to open things up for other guys, namely Crowder. I don't trust the rookie and Elijah Moore. In PPR formats, I think Crowder could be a decent, low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. And then for the Patriots, Jacoby Myers, he's been the guy that's been getting you those receptions, albeit no touchdowns, as frustrating as that has been. But, he's the most consistent guy here. Not exactly huge ceiling or anything like that, but consistency at the end of the day, at least in my opinion, is a little bit more important. I will say Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, I have them as sits. Yes, this is a very favorable matchup, but to me, it's going to be the Patriots rushing attack that is featured here. And for that reason, I don't think we're going to see that many fantasy viable wide receivers for the Patriots. So it's mainly Myers in my opinion. Then Eagles at the Raiders. Look, Devonta Smith had a pretty disappointing game this last week, and that's what we want to highlight with these rookies. There's going to be inconsistencies. We said it with Jalen Waddle, and especially with the Eagles, who Jalen Hurts, not exactly the most pass-heavy quarterback, going to rely on rushing the football a lot. The Eagles usually come out slow offensively to begin with, but Devonta Smith is still by far and away the highest upside guy on this offense. So I think you kind of take a chance on him, similar to maybe a Marquise Brown, but just not quite as consistent, a much more raw version of that. For the Raiders, Hunter Renfrow. And again, this is a good example of consistency versus boom or bust, because Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards both, had more yards, a touchdown compared to Renfrow this last week, but give me the guy that's going to get them more get more targets and isn't as touchdown dependent. Because you take away, that one big play, that one touchdown from Ruggs or an Edwards, they're even worse than Hunter Renfrow. So for that reason, I'm fading them there. If you want to say, okay, with the amount of bye weeks that there are, injuries, you want to pick out one boom or bust guy, I'd point you in the direction of Henry Ruggs. He seems to kind of be above Bryan Edwards in that pecking order, but to me, just a little bit too risky. And then Jalen Reagor, I feel as if for the Eagles, there's no point in mentioning anyone else other than Devonta Smith. All these guys are just, completely invisible, I would almost say, for the Eagles. So I'm fading every other wide receiver not named Devonta Smith, who I also have question marks about, so not ideal for the Eagles. Next up, we have got the Lions at the Rams, and this is another game where if you told me you want to sit every single Lions wide receiver, I really wouldn't have an issue with that, because I think the Rams are going to absolutely smoke the Lions. The Rams have a really good defense, and the Lions right now, they're just struggling in all types of ways, wide receiver wise. It's slim pickings. You've got a lot of young guys to rely on. And I think it's going to ultimately end up being like the TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift type of show. I'm really worried about the Lions, barely scoring any points in this game, even though, you've got the Jared Goff revenge game factor here. Not that it really matters all that much, in my opinion. If you force me to go with one guy, I'd go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think him and Raymond are going to see similar types of targets. But, ultimately, I personally like the talent of Amon-Ra a little bit better, so that's why I take a chance on him. For the Rams, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. Kupp has asserted himself, at least with Matthew Stafford, to be the number one guy on this offense. Robert Woods is that number 2, but that's all right. I think that's still very valuable versus this Lions team, this Lions defense. And then I'm sitting all the other wide receivers for the Rams. Yes, they have some nice upside in Van Jefferson and Deshaun Jackson, but I think here you're going to see the rushing attack of the Rams featured, because I wouldn't be shocked if they go up big quickly and then just turn it over to Henderson and Sony Michel, and that's why I'd only look at Kupp and Robert Woods. Following this, Bears at the Bucks. Another game where if you told me Mooney and Allen Robinson, basically the only 2 wide receivers for the Bears that are viable in fantasy, that you want to sit both of them, I'd have zero issues with that. The reason I'm giving the slight edge on Mooney over Allen Robinson is because I imagine that the Bucs are going to focus in more so on Allen Robinson, try and shut him down. So that's going to open up more opportunities for Darnell Mooney. But either way, I think both these guys, like at best, are low-end wide receiver 2s. Yes, the Bucs defense, specifically their secondary, can be beat, but I have zero faith in the Bears offense to do that. I think that the offensive line is questionable, and I think the Bucs are going to get after Justin Fields, really pressure him, and force him to beat them with his arm, which I haven't seen consistently. I have questions about the play calling. I think it's going to be ugly for the Bears here. But for the Bucs, Mike Evans, Godwin, Antonio Brown, I'd fire them all up. Yes, to some extent, they have low-end wide receiver 2 floors, but also some really nice high upside. The Bears secondary doesn't scare me, so Evans, Godwin, Antonio Brown, I take a chance on all of them here. Then Texans at the Cards. For the Texans, continues to only be Brendan Cooks. No one else really of interest. I haven't even listed any other Houston wide receivers. For the Cardinals, DeAndre Hopkins, he's always listed here. That's a no-brainer. Then the question is, what number 2 wide receiver do you trust? We were able to hit on Christian Kirk this last week, even though AJ Green also had a good outing. And here, I think that'll be the case again. I do believe versus this Texans defense that the Cardinals are going to have another viable wide receiver. The question is, who do you go with? I think Rondale Moore is a sit, way too inconsistent, in that rookie bucket. Christian Kirk, a little too boomer bust, so that leaves AJ Green there. I take a chance on him. Low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 because of the matchup here. And then I'm sitting Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk. Afterwards, Colts at the 49ers. This is an interesting one here for the Colts because now with T.Y. Hilton back, I think that Pittman's ceiling is going to go significantly down, but I want to see T.Y. Hilton in tougher matchups. That's what I'm looking for here. I want to see Carson Wentz in games where he's going to air out the football more so. I think that's what's going to need to happen versus the 49ers. And until I see T.Y. Hilton's involvement at that point in time, I still give the edge to Michael Pittman, but I don't think he can be viewed as a high-end wide receiver 2 anymore. I think, you look at him as a low-end wide receiver 2, mid-level guy at best. And then all the other guys right now I have as sits, definitely Campbell, Pascal. Hilton, if he has another good game here, then you could make an argument, but otherwise, I'd rather sit him. For the 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo is trending towards playing, which means Deebo Samuel is a guy that I feel pretty good about. Brendan Ayuk, I would still rather sit. I think the 49ers are going to focus in on the formula that's been working for them. Deebo Samuel, the rushing attack, and, just kind of play smart football, see what their defense can do. So for that reason, I'm sitting Ayuk. He's just been a little bit too inconsistent for my liking this season. Then finally, Saints at the Seahawks. Only one wide receiver I want to start here. That is DK Metcalf. And kind of what I predicted took place this last week with the Seahawks. With Russell Wilson hurt and Geno Smith under center, Metcalf was the guy, that was looked at more often on this wide receiver duo, him and Tyler Lockett, who Lockett I actually have as a sit. He becomes much more boom or bust for me here without Russell Wilson. I don't trust Geno Smith. Metcalf is that bigger bodied guy who's going to be more utilized by an inconsistent passer in Geno Smith. So I'll take my chance there. Also, the Saints, can be a stingy type of matchup. So I'm a little bit scared about the Seahawks this week. For the Saints, Marcus Callaway, Deontay Harris, yes, they can have some all right touchdown upside, but Winston also inconsistent. I don't love the wide receiver room here. I could see this being kind of the Alvin Kamara show. And for that reason, I'm fading both those guys. And then Tyler Lockett, again, without Russell Wilson, in my opinion, just too difficult to trust. So I'm sitting him there. But with that, we wrap up our Week 7 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. And as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them all. And if you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.